I was 15 when it happened. It was a Friday night in late September, the air just starting to turn cold. My parents went out for dinner with family friends and said they'd be home late, so I had the house to myself. I invited my neighbor and best friend, Chris, to come over. He was the same age and lived across the street. Usually, we spent our nights in the basement, playing games or watching horror movies. But that night, we got bored. Chris grinned and suggested something childish, hide and seek. I laughed at first, thinking he was kidding, but he reminded me how fun it had been when we played with a group before. My house wasn't big, but it had plenty of dark corners, the kind that made shadows look alive when the lights were off. So, we turned off almost every light in the house, leaving only the one in the kitchen glowing dimly. The rules were simple: no going outside, no attic, and no crawl space. Everything else was fair game: the basement, bedrooms, closets, and under furniture. Chris wanted to hide first. I covered my eyes in the living room and began counting to 50. I could hear him running at first, doors creaking open and slamming shut. Then silence. Ready or not, here I come, I called. I started in the kitchen, nowhere to hide. I checked behind the basement door, the bathroom, and the hall closet. Nothing. The house creaked like it was alive, and I could hear faint wind outside, brushing against the windows. Upstairs, the floorboards groaned beneath my feet. I peeked into my parents' room, empty. Then into mine, messy, but not enough space to hide. Finally, I went to the guest room at the end of the hall. The door was cracked open, and a shadow stretched across the carpet. I pushed the door open slowly, half expecting him to jump out and yell. But the room was dark, cold, and silent. I checked under the bed. Nothing. The closet was empty too. That's when I figured he must have gone to the basement. The air down there always smelled like dust and damp concrete. When I pulled back the boxes near the old laundry machine, there he was, crouched behind them, grinning. He laughed when I found him, teasing, "Took you long enough." I didn't realize then. That would be the last time I laughed that night. We played again, trying to laugh it off. But every sound in that house made my skin crawl. At one point, while counting, I heard a soft thud from upstairs, like something falling. I went up to check, but every room was empty. I found Chris hiding behind the laundry machines again. We sat on the couch afterward, the tension fading just a little. Then we heard it. A loud bump from upstairs, like something heavy hitting the floor. Chris frowned. "Maybe your parents are back early?" I shook my head. "They said they'd be late." The sound came again. A dragging noise. Then, faint, but unmistakable, slow, deliberate footsteps across the upstairs hallway. We both froze. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then I whispered, "We should check." Chris shook his head, whispering, "No way." But we couldn't just sit there. I picked up the fireplace poker and nodded for him to stay behind me. Every step up the stairs groaned under our weight. The hallway stretched out, dim and cold. Then I saw it, the guest room door. It was closed. I knew I'd left it cracked open. We stopped, staring. Then came a noise from behind it, a slow dragging sound, like something heavy sliding across the carpet. Chris whispered, "We should get out." But curiosity and fear tangled inside me. My hand shook as I reached for the doorknob. I swung the door open fast. The room was empty. The bed, the dresser, all still. Only the faint smell of dust in the air. The closet stood slightly open. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I walked toward it. I yanked it open, nothing but coats and boxes. We both laughed nervously, trying to convince ourselves it was nothing. But before we could leave, we heard it again. This time, the sound came from downstairs. From the first floor came the clear, heavy sound of the front door opening, then closing. Chris and I froze. Someone was in the house. We moved quietly down the hallway and into my room, turning off the lights. I clutched the fireplace poker so tight my knuckles turned white. For a moment, it was silent. Then, footsteps. Slow, careful ones, moving across the living room floor. I wanted to call the police, but my phone was downstairs on the couch. I whispered, "We could sneak out the window," but it was too small. The only way out was past the stairs, toward the sound. The footsteps paused, then moved toward the basement door. We heard it open, then each creaking step as someone walked down. We both exhaled, realizing whoever it was had gone into the basement. That was our chance. We ran. We sprinted down the stairs, through the kitchen, and out the back door. The cold air hit us like ice as we crossed the yard and ran straight to Chris's house. His parents were home. When we told them what happened, they called the police immediately. The officers searched every inch of my house, top to bottom. No one was there. No signs of forced entry. No footprints. They said it was probably just the house settling, or our imagination after playing in the dark. But Chris and I knew what we heard. The footsteps, the breathing, the door. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in that house made my heart race. That night changed everything. We never played hide and seek again. And even now, years later, I still think about that dragging sound in the carpet and the footsteps walking the halls when no one should have been there. I grew up on a quiet street that bordered a thick stretch of woods. Behind our houses, it was nothing but trees as far as you could see. When I was younger, a group of us kids, me, Tyler, his little brother Matt, and our friends Jason and Eric, spent nearly every weekend together. During the summers, we'd stay outside until our parents yelled for us to come home. Our favorite game was always hide and seek. We played in the backyards, sometimes venturing just into the edge of the woods. During the day, it was harmless fun, but at night the trees seemed to swallow the light. The woods became darker, quieter, almost like they were holding their breath. That was what made it exciting. That was what made it scary. The last time I ever played hide and seek out there, I was 14. It was a hot, humid August night, and even though the air was sticky, it felt cooler outside than sitting in anyone's basement. There were 5 of us that night. Jason volunteered to be it. When he started counting, the rest of us scattered. I ran into the woods with Tyler, but we split up once we passed the first row of trees. I crouched behind a fallen log, my heart pounding even though I knew it was just a game. I could hear Jason counting in the distance, his voice echoing softly through the night, then silence. The crickets were loud, the leaves rustling above me. Then I heard something else. Footsteps, slow and heavy, crunching through the dry leaves. I thought it was Jason, so I stayed perfectly still. The steps stopped close by. I waited, but whoever it was didn't move. I almost whispered to ask who it was, but the rules stopped me. If I gave myself away, I'd lose. Finally, the footsteps began again, moving deeper into the woods. I listened until I couldn't hear them anymore, my pulse quickening. When Jason called out that the round was over, I crawled back toward the yards. Everyone was already there, except Matt. He came running out a minute later, laughing, dirt all over him. I told them I'd heard someone walk by me, but Jason frowned. He said he never went that far into the woods. Jason's confusion didn't sit right with me. He swore he hadn't gone past the first few trees, and the others backed him up. I laughed it off, pretending it didn't bother me, but inside, I couldn't shake the chill that crawled up my spine. If Jason hadn't been the one walking near me, then who was? We started another round. This time, I was the seeker. I leaned against a tree, covered my eyes, and began counting loudly so everyone could hear. When I hit 20, I shouted that I was coming and turned on my flashlight. Its weak beam barely cut through the dark. The yards were quiet except for the hum of crickets and the distant barking of a dog. I checked behind sheds, fences, and under decks. I found Eric first, crouched behind a shed, trying not to laugh. Then I spotted Tyler hiding in the bushes near the back fence. They both ran out grinning, and I kept going. That left Jason and Matt. Both of them had gone into the woods. I took a deep breath and stepped between the trees, sweeping the flashlight across the ground. The beam caught flashes of pale bark and twisting roots. The deeper I went, the quieter it got, like the night itself was holding its breath. Then I heard it again. The same slow, deliberate footsteps crunching through the leaves somewhere ahead of me. I froze. My flashlight trembled in my hand as I tried to see through the dense shadows. The steps were heavy, almost measured, like someone pacing. Jason, I called out. No answer. I took a cautious step forward. The footsteps stopped instantly. My breath caught in my throat. I stood perfectly still, waiting, listening. Then, nothing. Not even the crickets. A cold, crawling feeling spread down my back. My instincts told me to leave, but curiosity pulled me forward. I inched closer, sweeping my flashlight left to right. Then, out of nowhere, "Round's over." Jason's voice shouted behind me. I jumped and spun around. Jason was walking out of the trees, flashlight in hand, smiling. "Man, you scared me." I laughed nervously. "Were you just ahead of me?" Jason shook his head. "No, I've been hiding closer to the house the whole time." My smile faded. Then who was in there with me? He frowned. What are you talking about? I didn't answer. I just looked past him, toward the dark stretch of trees that suddenly felt endless. Twice now, I'd heard those footsteps. Twice, they'd stopped when I did. And both times, no one had been there. For the first time that summer, the woods didn't feel like our playground. They felt alive, like something was watching us. After that round, I couldn't relax. Every laugh, every rustle of leaves made me jump. The others were still having fun, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was just my imagination, I told myself. Maybe I'd psyched myself out. We played a few more rounds anyway. I hid behind trees, behind old logs, even in the tall grass near the fence line. But no matter where I went, I couldn't shake that uneasy weight in my chest. I kept hearing faint noises in the woods, branches snapping, soft crunches of leaves, too slow and spaced out to be an animal. Once, when I shined my flashlight between the trees, I thought I saw a movement, a tall shadow slipping between the trunks. I froze, staring, but when I moved the light again, it was gone. Probably just a trick of the dark, I told myself. Still, I stayed close to the edge of the woods for the rest of the night. By the time the final round started, Jason wanted to hide in the woods again. Last one before we go in, he said. Everyone agreed. I didn't want to go back in, but I didn't want to seem scared either. So I nodded and followed them. We split up like before. I didn't go far, just enough to see the porch lights faintly glowing through the branches. I crouched low in the tall grass, my knees pressing into the dirt. I could hear Jason counting from somewhere behind me. Then silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. The wind had stopped. Even the bugs had gone quiet. A minute passed, then another. That's when I heard it. Whispering. A low, slow voice drifting through the trees. I couldn't make out any words, but it was close, too close. I froze, holding my breath, straining to listen. The whispering stopped. Then, footsteps. Soft at first, like someone stepping carefully through the leaves. Then heavier, more deliberate. I pressed myself into the grass, my heart hammering so loud I was sure it would give me away. The steps passed by just a few feet away. I could hear the faint sound of breathing, slow, deep, steady. My skin prickled all over. I peeked up over the grass, expecting to see one of the guys. But the space between the trees was empty. Empty, except for movement. Someone, was shifting just beyond the reach of the porch light. I could only make out the faint outline of a figure. Tall. Still. Watching. Then Jason's voice broke the silence, calling that the game was over. The whispering stopped instantly. The footsteps vanished. I waited a few seconds before standing up. My legs were shaking. I walked back toward the yard, pretending nothing was wrong. The others were laughing, brushing dirt off their clothes. I tried to join in, but my voice trembled. When I told them what I'd heard, the whispering, they laughed. Said I was trying to freak them out. But I knew what I heard. I wasn't trying to scare anyone. The truth was, I was already scared enough for all of us. We sat in Tyler's backyard after that last round, our flashlights dim and our drinks warm. Everyone was laughing again, talking about how good the game had been, how nobody could ever find Matt when he hid. I tried to join in, but I couldn't stop thinking about that whispering voice and those footsteps that had stopped right beside me. My skin still felt cold, even in the humid air. That's when Matt suddenly spoke up. "Hey," he said quietly, almost like he didn't want to say it out loud. "Did anyone else see the man?" Everything went still. Jason laughed first, thinking it was a joke. "What man?" he said. But Matt wasn't smiling. He looked serious, pale even. "When I was hiding," he said, "I saw a tall man standing between the trees. He wasn't moving. He was just watching." Eric started to chuckle again, but his voice cracked halfway through. "You're messing with us," he said. Matt shook his head. "No, I swear. He was right there, by the old stump. I thought maybe it was one of you guys trying to scare me, but he didn't move. Not once." Everyone went quiet again. I didn't say anything at first, but my stomach dropped. I believed him. Every hair on my arm stood up. Because I remembered the whispering, and I remembered those footsteps that stopped near me. The breathing that wasn't mine. It all made sense now. Jason finally spoke, trying to laugh it off. "Probably just someone cutting through the woods," he said. "A neighbor or something." But none of us really believed that. There were no houses beyond those trees, just miles of forest. After that, nobody wanted to play anymore. We packed up the flashlights and went home early. I remember walking down the street, glancing back toward the woods. The trees were still, black silhouettes against the moonlight. I thought I saw something move in there, but I didn't stay to check. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every creak of the house making my heart jump. The whispering replayed in my mind again and again. It felt like it had been right next to my ear. The next morning, I asked Tyler if he'd heard anything strange before we left the night before. He shook his head. "Nah," he said. "Just bugs and the wind." But Matt didn't come out to play that day. Or the next. Eventually, the group stopped playing hide-and-seek in the woods altogether. Nobody really said why. We just knew. Years later, when I drive past that old neighborhood, I still glance toward the tree line. The woods are thicker now, darker. But every time the wind moves through them, I swear I can hear it. The faint sound of leaves crunching, slow and steady. Sometimes, if I listen closely enough, I think I can still hear that whisper. And it reminds me of that night, the night we learned that when you hide in the dark woods, you're never really alone. It was one of those blazing July afternoons when the air itself felt heavy. I was 14, living deep in rural Pennsylvania, where the horizon is just fields, trees, and silence. My friends, Ryan, Josh, and Adam, were over, and we'd been playing basketball in the driveway for about an hour before collapsing on the grass, sweating and gulping down water. That's when we saw him. A boy, maybe 16, walking up the dirt road that ran past my house. None of us had seen him before. He was tall, pale, with messy black hair that fell over his eyes, and he wore jeans and a gray shirt even though it was sweltering out. He stopped near the edge of the yard and stared at us for a second before stepping closer. "You guys need one more?" he asked, like he already knew us. We exchanged confused looks. Finally, Adam spoke up. "Who are you?" He said his name was Keith. Claimed he lived just up the road and had seen us while walking through the woods. I'd lived there my entire life and never seen a Keith anywhere around. Still, his tone was easy, calm, too calm. When we asked if he wanted to play basketball, he just smiled and said, "Nah, let's play manhunt. Your yard's perfect for it." At the time, we didn't think much about how he already seemed to know layout of my property. In hindsight, that should have been a red flag. We split into two teams. Keith insisted on being one of the hunters first. "I love being the seeker," he said. His grin didn't reach his eyes. Adam kicked a soccer ball into the air to start the game. Ryan ran for the tree line. Ben dashed behind the garage, and I slipped into the old storage shed that always smelled of gasoline and rotting wood. I hid under a pile of folded tarps, my heart thumping in muffled darkness. Minutes passed, maybe 10. Then shed door creaked open. A flash of light. The tarp was ripped away. But it wasn't Keith, it was Adam, smiling. "Got you." We laughed and walked back toward the house, but something felt off. Back at the patio, the sun hung low, and the heat finally started to break. Adam and I were laughing about how bad my hiding spot had been when Ben showed up, caught too. Soon after, Josh wandered over. One by one, everyone came back, except Keith. At first, we didn't really notice. We figured maybe he was still searching or decided to mess with us. But after 10 minutes passed, Adam frowned and said, "Where's Keith?" We all looked toward the tree line. The woods were quiet, just the hum of cicadas and the soft breeze through the branches. No movement. No voice calling out. Nothing. "Maybe he went home," Ryan said. Without saying anything, I asked. We waited another few minutes, calling his name. "Keith." "Game's over, man." No answer. Finally, Adam shrugged. "Weird kid. Probably just wandered off." We all agreed, though something about it didn't sit right. The way he'd appeared out of nowhere, and now vanished just as easily, it didn't feel normal. The sun dipped lower, turning the yard orange and gold. One by one, my friends headed home, leaving me standing alone in the fading light. That's when I noticed something strange near my bedroom window, just a few feet from the side of the house. A piece of rope. It was thick, old, weathered, like it had been outside for months. But I knew it hadn't been there earlier that day. I picked it up, felt the roughness of the fibers, and tossed it aside, trying not to think about it. Still, the thought stuck in my head like a splinter. Why would there be a rope by my window? That evening, my dad came home late from work, so I didn't mention it. But as night fell, I couldn't shake the image of that rope. And worse, the feeling that someone had been close enough to my house to leave it there. Before bed, I checked every door, every window. Everything was locked. My dad always left the side door open during the day, but I made sure to bolt it. By 11, I was in bed scrolling through my phone, half distracted. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Soft. Right outside my bedroom door. The footsteps were faint at first, barely audible over the hum of the ceiling fan. I froze, holding my breath. My room was dark except for the glow of my phone screen. I waited, listening. The steps came again, slow and careful, moving just beyond the door. My dad sometimes got up at night, but he always coughed or muttered something under his breath. This was silent, too silent. "Dad," I called softly. No reply. The footsteps stopped. Right outside my door. My pulse hammered in my chest. I sat up, staring at the doorknob, half expecting it to turn. The air felt thick, like the whole house was holding its breath. After what felt like forever, I forced myself to get up. My legs trembled as I stepped across the carpet. I locked the door with a shaky hand. The next sound made my stomach drop. The faint creak of the front door opening downstairs, followed by a soft click as it shut. Someone had been inside the house. I ran straight to my dad's room, shaking him awake. He sat up instantly when he saw my face. "What happened?" he asked. "There was someone in the house," I stammered. I heard footsteps, then the door. He didn't waste a second. He grabbed the shotgun from under his bed and motioned for me to stay close. We moved room to room, checking every closet, every corner, the basement, even the garage. Nothing. Finally, he went outside with a flashlight, sweeping the beam across the open yard, the shed, the tree line. The woods loomed black and endless beyond the grass. He found no one. When he came back, we locked every door and window. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, but I knew what I'd heard. The next morning, I told my friends. They laughed it off. Ryan said, "Dude, maybe Keith's just some drifter. He probably wandered off after the game." But then Ryan hesitated. He was acting weird though, he said. Barely talked. Just kept staring. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every creak of the house making my heart jump. The whispering replayed in my mind again and again. It felt like it had been right next to my ear. The next morning, I asked Tyler if he'd heard anything strange before we left the night before. He shook his head. "Nah," he said. "Just bugs and the wind." But Matt didn't come out to play that day. Or the next. Eventually, the group stopped playing hide-and-seek in the woods altogether. Nobody really said why. We just knew. Years later, when I drive past that old neighborhood, I still glance toward the tree line. The woods are thicker now, darker. But every time the wind moves through them, I swear I can hear it. The faint sound of leaves crunching, slow and steady. Sometimes, if I listen closely enough, I think I can still hear that whisper. And it reminds me of that night. The night we learned that when you hide in the dark woods, you're never really alone. The scratching continued, soft but steady, tracing slow arcs across the glass like whoever, or whatever, was out there wanted me to know they were there. My chest tightened. I couldn't move at first, just listen to that unbearable sound, each scrape longer than the last. I swallowed hard and forced myself to look. My fingers trembled as I lifted one of the blinds just enough to peek through. A shape stood on the other side of the window. Tall, motionless, close enough that if the glass weren't there, I could have reached out and touched it. The porch light was off, but the faint moonlight revealed the outline of a person, broad shoulders, a still head. I couldn't see the face, just a dark silhouette pressed against the glass. I stumbled back, my throat tight, a sound escaping before I could stop it. I screamed for my dad. He was out of his room in seconds. I pointed toward the window, gasping out what I'd seen. Without hesitation, he grabbed the shotgun again and ran outside barefoot. I heard him yell, his voice booming through the night. Then came 2 deafening gunshots that echoed off the trees. When he came back, his face was pale. "No one's there," he said, breathing hard. But I could tell from his eyes that he wasn't convinced. Neither of us slept after that. We sat in the living room with every light on, waiting for dawn. My dad kept the shotgun across his lap. Every now and then, he got up to check the doors again, muttering under his breath. When morning came, I went outside with him. There were footprints in the dirt below my window, bare, human footprints. The prints led away toward the woods and vanished where the grass began. My dad clenched his jaw. "If that kid comes back, I'll deal with him," he said quietly. I wanted to believe it was just Keith. Some twisted prank. But part of me knew better. Keith had appeared out of nowhere. knew too much about our yard, and disappeared without a trace. That night changed everything. Even now, years later, when I step outside and the air is still, I sometimes imagine I hear that slow dragging sound again, the one that started it all, the scratching on the glass. And every time, I find myself glancing toward the woods, half expecting to see a tall figure standing in the shadows, waiting. Because I never did find out who Keith really was, or what he wanted.